first ones. And I think he sold a product line to somebody and they integrated in their numbers.
I discovered the internet. I know Al Gore thinks he discovered, but I discovered it.
It's nice of
Al
you,
Gore.
Doc.
What?
He said he did.
Are we too young to understand this?
Yes.
It's all right.
You know who Al Gore is, though, right?
No, Al Gore.
Yeah. Gore.
The eco billionaire.
O-R-E, what?
The presidential candidate?
Vice president and then presidential candidate. You're right. You're right, man.
He's more famous for being an eco billionaire.
Yeah, that's right. And his own plane. Does he have?
Billions. Billions.
And he didn't chips.
The largest, what do they call it? The footprint? What's it called?
Carbon.
Carbon. The largest carbon footprint
Is that right?
in Tennessee is his house. He made his billions on Echo, like he's Mr. Echo. His house has the largest carbon footprint of any house in the state of Tennessee.
I don't think Tipper cares for him anymore.
Okay. Very exciting things.
Yeah, sure.
We're already a minute and a half in, they've already left.
Uh-oh.
The people who show up and then they leave.
Oh. Better be quiet.
It's all right.
And then they may like what I say.
Okay, so we have said that the reason that the neshama is not affected by Mayim Rabim is because the source of the neshama is in Atzmus, and Atzmus is the highest level of reality, and in that place the neshama cannot be affected negatively by anything. It's the place of our essential connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and essence is unchangeable. It's the nature of essence, as opposed to revealed reality. Revealed reality is a subject of differentiation. Higher levels, lower levels. Until you get down here and there's actually multiplicity in revealed reality. Okay, so the last thing we saw in the Mimer actually, first the Rebbe asked the question that we had asked, but we knew the Rebbe was not going to answer until this ois hey. The Rebbe asked the question. We don't really ask the question, it just explains the answer. It says, even though the shorish of the neshama is atzmus, still the neshama experiences an elevation when it comes into this world, which is something we didn't understand because there's nothing elevated from atzmus. But before the Rebbe explains that, the Rebbe explains something very, very important. How do we know that the source of the neshama is in atzmus? So how do we know that the source of the neshama is in atzmus? You learned it yesterday. Excuse me? How's the Rebbe know? The source of, that's, okay, great. You ask a question, Rashi, it's Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, that means I'm now putter from understanding anything.
Zohar.
No, that's not what the Rebbe said. Right? How do you and I know that how does anybody know? How does Torah teach us that the source of the neshama is in Atzmus? Where's Amnon when I need him? So he remembers things because he writes them down religiously and looks at his notes. But here he is, his seat is empty.
Medrash Rabbah.
Medrash Rabbah. What did the Medrash in Rus Rabbah say? You really don't remember these things? It's like an amazing Medrash. I regular everyday stuff I get, but this Medrash is just a wild Medrash. The Medrash says, "B'min nimlach," in whom did HaKadosh Baruch Hu take counsel? Who did he ask? Should I create the world or should I not create the world? So to speak. The neshames of the nishmeseim shel tzaddikim. Okay, where was that question asked? So to speak. Should I or should I not create a world? Well, where's that decision, so to speak, being made?
Way up there.
Way up there.
Atzmus.
Atzmus.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's neshamas and atzmas that are being asked, so to speak. Should I or should I not create the world? Whatever that means, it's a wild idea that is, I don't know about you, but I don't understand it. Later on in the Mimer, we will. At this point, I don't. Because, as we said yesterday, if there's already neshamas of tzaddikim, so then the Eibusher sort of already made the decision to create the world, hasn't he? Because the whole idea of a neshama is that it's going to come down to Elam Hazeh and do something, or it's going to go somewhere and do something. But There are these neshamas up there in Atzmus, and the Eibishter took counsel with them. What in the world is that counsel? We don't know. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm starting at the beginning of the 5th line. Despite the fact that we have said that the neshamas, that their source is higher than all revealed reality, than all levels of light, that their source is in the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the source of all being ultimately. And when we say being, we mean even godly being, even different levels of godly reality. Their source is in Atzmus, and Atzmus isn't a level, it's just Atzmus is referred to as Yesh Amiti, true being. And what is unique about true being? It doesn't have a source in any other level of being. Right? Because again, if I have a source in something else, then what really exists is it, not me. Right? I mean, I'm just an expression of its existence because it's the source of my existence. So that doesn't mean I don't exist at all, but my existence is dependent on something else. So therefore, my existence is in no way, shape, or form absolute. Because if that thing were to go out of existence, then I would go out of existence. Okay. There's only one level of existence that doesn't come from anywhere, so to speak. That doesn't have any source. What's that called? The essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How does that work? We don't know. Where did it come from? Don't know. Why is it there? No reason. What's its function? Doesn't have one. Well, where did it come from? Didn't. Well, who put it there? No one put it there. It's this. Well, why is he there? It's this being called God. Well, why? Well, where did he come from? Didn't. Well, when did he start? Didn't. Godly light is called Or Ein Sof. Has no end. Which is true. The Eibishter himself, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is on a much higher level. It has no beginning. Godly light has a beginning. What's the beginning of all godly light? Whenever the Eibishter decided that that level of light should come into existence, it came into existence. Okay, now what? Now it's Ein Sof. Now it's infinite. But there was a reality without that, the existence of that level of light. Again, not in time, obviously, or but on some level there was a reality without that level of existence, because that, as we saw, the Rebbe told us in the Mayim, that level of existence exists only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to. So to speak, before that desire, was there such a level of existence? No. What is that level of existence? The highest level of existence of godly light imaginable. The essence of our Ein Sof before any diminishing of it whatsoever. That level of light. It exists because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to, not because it has to. It doesn't have to. There was a beyond infinite amount of non-time before that showed up. Right? Again, we can't talk in time terms, but I mean, we have no choice because that's all we know. Right? So, before the desire to create a world, what was there? The Eibishter, Atzmus. What was he doing? He doesn't do. He's not a functionary. He's just being. Why? Who's there? But there's, of course, no there. Just is. That's called Yesh Amiti, true being. Absolute being. Amazing. Very difficult for us to wrap our head around how something just is without having a source in something else. Because everything we experience has a source in something else. Except the Eibishter. He is the source. Okay. And that's where our neshama comes from. So there's nothing before that, higher than that, beyond that. So how can it possibly be that our neshama experiences an elevation by virtue of coming down into this world? It starts in the loftiest, most godly, most powerful state of reality imaginable. Matter of fact, it's even beyond imaginable. Fifth line, Mikol Makim. Nevertheless, Shayach Leimar, it's reasonable to say, It's relevant to say, Shal Yedei HaTshuva, by virtue of tshuva, B'yiridosin Lamata, by virtue of the descent soul down into this world, and being clothed in a body, and dealing with all the craziness of this world. Nases behen aliyah, it's brought about in them an elevation. Gam lagavi adarga shay b'sharshan, even relative to, or also relative to, the level that the neshama was in its source. Okay, now the Rebbe is going to explain that to us. And that's the end of the Mayim, basically. V'yuven zeh al pi masha nemar harav hamagid. This is understood by what was said by the Rav HaMagid. The Magidim is rich, one of the great Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, who became the Rebbe after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. For the first year, the Baal Shem Tov's son was the leader of the Chavraya Kedisha, of the Holy Brotherhood. And then on the Baal Shem Tov passed away on Shavuos. The following year, on his father's yahrzeit, the Baal Shem Tov's son got up, took off the cloak that he had gotten from his father and gave it to the Magid and said, the Magid is the Rebbe, the Magid is the leader of the Chassidim. And the Magid had some rather illustrious Talmidim. For us, the most illustrious, obviously, is the Baal Tanya, the Alter Rebbe. But Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, Rav Eli Melech of Lezhansk, Zusha of Anapoli, Rav Pinchas of Koretz. I mean, all of the great Hasidic masters of the first generation, well, they were the third, but the first generation, the Hasidus really started to be spread out all over, were Talmidim of the Magid. The Alter Rebbe once said, I heard this from a very, very real source, with Fitchi Eifen. The Alter Rebbe once said that every Torah that he ever taught us was one Shabbos meal by the Magid. I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, simple pshat is that he learned Torah one Shabbos meal by the Magid, and he spent, and everything he ever taught us, he heard in that Shabbos meal. Mm-hmm. The Magid was it's safer. Magid Rav Yaakov. V'yuven zeh al pi ma shekosav b'Magid. Rav HaMagid, how he's called. Befeirush Maimer Chazal, based on a statement in Breishis Rabbah, right at the beginning, and Rashi doesn't quote this medrash, but Rashi explains Breishis in line with this medrash. He quotes another medrash from Breishis Rabbah. Yisrael alu b'machshava, that Yisrael went up on thought. Now, simple pshat in that is even before the dibur, even before the speech that brought the world into creation, right? The Kadosh Baruch Hu spoke and reality began to exist. What's speaking? Speaking is revealing what's heretofore hidden inside you. You reveal it outside of yourself, so to speak. Now, relative to us, it's not so to speak, it's outside of us. Relative to the Eibishter, creation is called speech because the Eibishter takes that which he has, called existence, and reveals it, so to speak, outside of himself. As if there's some reality outside of him. Now, there is no reality outside of him. That's what we call it, mamokim, the place. It's not that the world is the place where you'll find God. God is the place where you'll find the world. The world exists inside the Eibishter, so to speak. We're, so to speak, a figment of his imagination. He thinks, and we come into being. Okay, so but that's such a Maimer Chazal, right? But machshava achas bara alma, with one thought, God created all of space and all of time. Okay, all of space and all of time that will ever be is one thought in God's life. Okay, that ever was or ever be. Okay, so everything can be connected to thought, but there's all in the revealed terms. So there's certain aspects of reality that are a function of speech, which is a more external expression, and there's certain aspects of reality that are a function of machshava. And what's that? Yisrael. That which is beyond, more pinimi, more powerfully connected to the inner reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so the Medrash says, Yisrael alu b'machshava. So how did the Maggid explain that Medrash? Shehu k'mashal Adam. This is like a person. Sheyesh le ben. There's a son. The Hagam shaben avar mikeneged panov. Even though the son has passed from before his face, in other words, the son has moved away. V'halach mita, and he moved away from him. So the son lives in one place and the father lives in another. So he can't see the son in Gashmias. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, nechkaka hatsura shel haben. It's engraved, the form, the image of the son, b'machshava shalav, in the thought of the father. Now that applies to anything that we've experienced consciously, but much more powerfully relative to children, because the source of the child is the Av. Right? The Ab and the Ima are the source of that child. So their connection to that child is obviously much more powerful than your connection to events that have happened to you in life. So you can conjure up the image of a face of someone you sat next to in grade 10. Okay, right, that's true. Right? But the image that a father has of his son is a much more powerful image, because the source of the son is the father. So even though the son is not there, so to speak, well, in that case, not so to speak, in the mashal, still the father, the image of the son doesn't leave the father's conscious reality. He's nechkak, engraved, the tsura, the form, the image of the son in the thought of the father. Oh, okay. So that's going to have something to do with Yisrael alu b'machshava, that we're engraved in the consciousness of the Eibishter. But there's obviously a difference between us and the Eibishter. Elo sheba b'nei Adam, relative to people, shayach zedavka, this idea is relevant b'mi sheyesh le ben, to someone who has a son. Be very hard for those of you who don't have children to conjure up an image of your children. Well, you don't have children yet, so how can you conjure up their image? Whereas people who do have children could close their eyes and conjure up. They don't have to close their eyes. Sometimes they just have to look in the mirror. But they could conjure up the image of their child very clearly, powerfully. Okay, well, because the child exists already in time and space. There's already a child. There's been a child. There's still a child. Even if chas v'shalom, there isn't still a child. But so by people, it is dependent on having a child. By the Eibishter is unlimited. So I was about to say something very fascinating. The Maggid. I was quoting the Maggid. Shayach ze loimer. It's relevant to say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu that, so to speak, the image of Yisrael is engraved in the thought of the Eibishter even before there's a Yisrael, because the Eibishter is not limited by time and space. So how is that going to be important? It's going to be very important. Wait until you see what the Rebbe says. Shayach ze loimer. It's relevant to say this. Af kedem shenivru Yisrael. That even before Yisrael actually came into a state of creation, as some state is in some state of reality where they appear to be separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this nation that's walking around on an earth. It was already engraved their image in his machshava, which is actually the source of their being. And that's what Chazal mean when they say Yisrael alu b'machshava. That even before the creation of the Yidden already existed in the Eibishter's consciousness. Relative to a parent, the child can't exist in the parent's consciousness until the child has been born, because you and I are limited by time and space. Now, the Eibishter is not limited by time and space, which in this context, time. So even though you and I, in the context of time, can talk about a before and an after, so there's before we're created and after we're created, that those terms are irrelevant to the Eibishter. So even what you and I would refer to as before we were created, there could be, not only could there be, there is, and that's what the Medrash is saying, an image of us that's engraved in the consciousness of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So now, why is that important for us? Let's see. Let's see what the Rebbe says. It says an amazing thing. אבל אצל השם יזברך שייך זה למר אף קדם שנבראו ישראל. היה נחקק צורסם במחשבה. It was engraved, their image, their form, in his thought. וכמי שכוסף רז"ל, לחז"ל say, ישראל על מחשבה. כי אצלוי, by the Eibishter, העבר והעתיד אחד. Past and future are one. That's interesting. The Rebbe doesn't mention present, which is just interesting. I mean, obviously, if past and future one, present is also one. But relative to the Eibishter, relative to you and I, so we have this experience of the present. But the present doesn't really exist. There's no. The present is simply the future being transformed into the past. How long does the present last? What does that mean? There's a word that I'm going to say. Okay, well, you don't know what that word is. So when I say it, all of a sudden, I've already said it, and you hear it. So we'll say I'm saying it, and you're hearing it. Now that's true. That's how we'll say it. There is a form called hoveh, present tense, in every language. But it is interesting that and that's the most powerful experience you and I have. We certainly have a very hard time imagining what the future looks like. We sometimes have a hard time conjuring up what the past looked like. That which we have the most powerful experience of is that thing we call the present, even though, does that exist, B'chlal? You want to call it a macrosecond? I don't know, how long, what is it exactly? Because as soon as you're aware of it, it already was. Right? As soon as I hear you speak, you already did. Okay, you're speaking, but everything that I'm hearing is something you already said. It's not what you're saying. I mean, again, in the context of the way we use language, it is. But it's interesting, in absolute terms, you said it already, otherwise how could I hear it? It takes time to get from your mouth to my ear. Not very much time, but some time. And even if it's light, so okay, it's going at 186,000 miles per second. Okay, but it shone over there before I saw it. How long was that? Well, basically such a small piece of time that it's immeasurable. Okay, but there is, time passes between the shining of the light and my experience of the shining of the light, even though it's going 186,000 miles per second, so it's pretty hard to measure that time. You can't move your hand on the stopwatch fast enough to, figure out how long it was, right? Oh, I got it. Right? It doesn't work. Right? Sound. Right? And remember, I don't know how they taught you these things in school, but I remember they used to show us a film of a light shining and a horn blowing. The horn was one of those horns that you would have at a train station or something. Something like that. So the horn, you see the smoke coming out of the horn because it's making noise, but you don't hear the noise yet. It takes a while until the noise gets to where you are, relative, the person filming this, where he is. Okay, so you could see very, very clearly the passage of time between the noise and when I experience the noise. Okay, just have to be far enough away. Where do you see that, in a fairly common way in your everyday existence in life? The different lightning and thunder. You see the lightning right away. How long does it take for the thunder to come? Well, it depends how far away the clouds are. If the thunder's right away, you're right in the middle of this thing. You better get inside. What? Oh, yeah, it's 4 a mile. That's interesting.
No, count.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's very interesting. Okay. Never knew that. That's interesting, right? Now, sometimes it'll be right away. You'll see the lightning and boom, whoa. You're right in the middle of that storm. Usually it's over there. So you see the lightning, and then after a while, so there you go. You just learn, count to 4. It's a mile, so keep counting, see how far it is. Might be 5 miles away, so it might take. It might be so far away you'll see the lightning. You won't even hear the thunder. You hear just sort of this little rumble over there, right? It happens to be that there's a bracha for lightning. There's a bracha for thunder. We only say one of the brachas. You can pick which. It's one of the few choices you have in halacha to pick a bracha. When you see lightning and hear thunder, so you can either say the bracha over thunder, or you can say the bracha over lightning. You get to say one for each storm, right? Meaning, if the same storm is happening for a day and a half, you say the bracha once, even though you saw lightning 10 times. But
You say there's a separate lady from
there's a separate bracha, but you only say one. But in order to say that bracha, you have to see the lightning and hear the thunder. It's not enough to see the lightning and not hear the thunder, or hear the thunder and not see the lightning. You have to see and hear, right? Because then you know it is. You might see light and think it's lightning, and you don't hear thunder. Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was, and you couldn't hear the thunder, but maybe it wasn't, so you don't make the bracha. Right? Okay. So there's a classic example of the difference between light and light. Okay, so all of that, which is very, very much part of our existence, that doesn't exist in God's world. What does it mean that you exist in a reality beyond time? I don't know. Like, it must be very bizarre. Like, what happens? Okay, don't know. But that's where the Eibishter lives. At least I'll know which one I used, huh? Okay. So by the Eibishter, ha'avar v'asid echad. See, it isn't really there. The Rebbe doesn't say present. I think later on he does. When he says it again, I think he does. But at this point he doesn't. Right? Okay. So that means, just in this, again, we're going to have to talk about it in terms of time. We're going to have to use words before and after, which doesn't apply to the Eibishter, but that's why we can explain the reality this way. That means that there's some reality of Am Yisrael that's powerfully connected to the Eibishter before our existence. We don't exist yet. Now, where don't we exist? It seems simple, because we don't exist down here, but we exist up there. Okay, it's not so hard to understand. Umuvan mizeh. So now the Rebbe says, so what's understood from this? An amazing idea. We'll move on mizeh. I'm sorry. From this, it's understood. The zeh mashen the shamis mushrashes batzmusi is butter. That which the neshamas are sourced mushrashot. The shorish of that word is shorish. That the neshamas are rooted ba'atzmusi is baruch, in the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ubahem nimlach, and in them he took counsel. What does that mean? Hu inyan neshamas kamei shehein bebechinas nivra. Wow. These are the neshamas as they are in the quality of being a created thing. What does that mean? Hu kamei shein yordei slamata, as they descend below. V'rak bat, meaning, so to speak, when the Eibishter asks the neshama, should I, up there in Atzmus. Now, that means obviously there's some reality of neshama in Atzmus. Why? Because in Atzmus, the Eibishter is, so to speak, aware of the existence of a neshama. Okay. So the neshama is up there. That being said, when the Eibishter asks the neshama, should I create the world or should I not? The Rebbe just said an amazing thing. What aspect of the neshama is the Eibishter asking? The neshama as it's down here. Aye, but what's the problem?
It's not on here.
It's not down here yet. Thank you very much, Eitan. I appreciate that. You were restoring my faith in humankind. The neshama's not down here yet.
But if to Hashem there's no time.
But let the Rebbe say it. We just
I'm
said
sorry,
the Rebbe the Rebbe just said that, right? So no, seriously, the Rebbe just said that. So now the Rebbe's going to explain some amazing reality based on that. It's not a but,
Okay.
right? It's not that. But it's not but according. That's what's so astounding about this. The Rebbe just was based on the fact that there's no time. The Rebbe can explain things this way. That's exactly what the Rebbe is saying. Let's see how he says it. So that question was asked of the neshamas down here. Aye, but they're not here yet. What does that mean? Oh. It's what are they? It's a trial. He sent us down here. He created a world, sent us down here, let it happen for 5 minutes, then destroyed the whole thing. We went back up there, and he said, "No, what do you think?"
That's why we call
No.
also.
What?
That's why we call also.
That's not what happened. So the Rebbe says, "Hu inyan neshama shemay keim bebechinas nivra k'meishen yordes lamata." But they're not lamata yet. V'rak shegam tzura zu, this image of the neshama's lamata, chakuka b'machshavta yizbarach, is engraved in the consciousness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu already, even though we're not there yet. Like we said, and the doctor also said, so that because the Eibush is beyond time. So now the Rebbe says, as if we're supposed to know this. Ukiyadua, as is well known, Perush B'minim Lach, what the pshat in that medrash is. Now, the Rebbe is quoting a mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, so he's expecting us to know that. He says what does it mean? What does it mean that the Eibishter asked the neshamas, and when we say that, the Rebbe is saying we're talking about the neshamas as they exist down here, even though they don't exist down here yet, okay, but that word yet doesn't exist by the Eibishter. He's asking, what's he asking? And how does that question? How's the question formed? And what's our answer? Obviously, our answer is yes, but how does that work? Look what the Rebbe says. He says something absolutely astounding. Shezeu masha ola lefanav yizbarach. It went up in front of the Eibishter, up there in Atzmus. And we'll use the word before, even though we can't use it relative to Atzmus, but say, okay, but you and I can. Before anything has happened relative to the creation of the world. There's no level of infinite godly light. There's absolutely only one thing. And what's that one thing in existence? Atzmusa Yizbarach, the etzem of the Eibishter. And what did the Eibishter experience, so to speak? And you have to say, so to speak, every time you talk about etzem. Masha ola lefanav Yizbarach hatainug, the pleasure. Sheyisaneg. Now, in English, there's no the pleasure that he will pleasure, but in Lashon HaKodesh, obviously, verbs and nouns, everything, they all work together. But we would say the pleasure that he experienced, that he will experience. It's in future tense. The pleasure that he will experience, kaviyachol, so to speak, ba'avedus and neshama lamata. By virtue of the service of the neshamas below. What does it mean the Eibishter asked our neshamas? It doesn't mean he asked our neshamas. But so to speak, who convinced the Eibishter to create the world? Our neshamas. How did our neshamas convince the Eibishter? What did the Eibishter experience before there was any world? The pleasure he gets from you and I sitting together and learning a Mayim Chassidus. He experienced that pleasure. There's no before. He experienced that pleasure. Who was giving him that pleasure? The neshama. And where was that neshama? Down in a goof in Olam Hazeh, in the Mayim Rabim. The neshama in a goof in Olam Hazeh, which doesn't exist yet. But the Eibishter, so to speak, had an image of that. It's like the Eibishter, so to speak, was watching the movie of you and I doing a mitzvah in Olam Hazeh, putting on tefillin, helping another yid, giving some tzedakah, learning Torah, shaking a lulav. The Eibishter, so to speak, saw that. Before there's a world, he saw that all happening. So now, what's the word? What are the words that the Rebbe uses? That the Eibishter experienced the pleasure that he gets from our mitzvahs, even though we're not doing mitzvahs yet. He's experiencing that pleasure. And so then what does he say? I want that to happen in Gashmas. I want that to actually happen. And then what starts? The whole process of the creation of the world. But so to speak, and this is Yisrael Ala B'Machshava. This is what it means, Yisrael Ala B'Machshava. What aspect of us went up on his thought, so to speak? The Eibishter experienced the pleasure he gets from you and I doing a mitzvah. Where? Down here. Like we said yesterday, it's not a function of you and I doing mitzvahs down here and then dying and going to some place better than we came from. No. Where are you up there in Atzmus? What was the ultimate image of the Yid in Atzmus that was responsible for the creation of the world? You with tefillin on. As a goof. As a neshama and a goof with tefillin on. That's, so to speak, what the Eibishter saw up there in Atzmus. He experienced the pleasure from that event and then said, I want that event to happen. Wow. That's why the Eibishter created the world. So he saw the movie and he said, I want it to happen. Now, we're applying, ideas to the Eibishter that obviously don't exist in the Eibishter the same way we're describing them. Okay, Beseder, but we're doing the best we can do to describe what's going on. Right? Wow. So let's see that again. Ukiyadua, b'peirush b'mi nimlach. Shazeh ma sha'olo lefanav, it went up in front of him, it went up in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hatainug, the pleasure she is aneg kaviyochel ba'avedus and neshamis lamato, the pleasure that he receives, will receive, meaning obviously by him he's receiving it, but you and I, it's going to happen because we're in year minus something, before zero. Kaviyochel ba'avedus and neshamis lamato. Val pi zeh yuv, and therefore the Rebbe says we understand very clearly Inyan Haliyah, the elevation shenaseh b'neshamis, that's brought about in the neshamas al yedei yiridos in lamata, by virtue of their descent below. Hagam, even though shegam lifnei yiridos, and even though before their descent into this world, hey mushuroshes batzmusis bark, they're already rooted in Atzmus, so I can get higher in Atzmus. Aye, but what was the ultimate expression of the neshama up there in Atzmus? Even higher than the essential existence of the neshama, what is the ultimate expression of the neshama up there in Atzmus? The Rebbe just told us. The neshama is the source of the neshama down here doing a mitzvah, putting on tefillin. That's what the neshama up there is really all about. Meaning, we spend a lot of time in Chassidus discussing the level of our neshama, such that our neshama is essentially connected to the Eibishter, and that's the nature of a Jew. And a Jew can't possibly be distant from the Eibishter. A Jew can't possibly be disconnected from the Eibishter. And every single Jew you meet, even though it might look like they're disconnected, and that Jew whose teeth you brush and hopefully floss, that person also might seem to be somewhat disconnected from the Eibishter at times, or sometimes, all the time, however negative you happen to be, hopefully not very, right? Okay. That being said, what do we know? That the Jew has an essential connection to the Eibishter. Why? Because my soul is mushrosh and atzmus. The soul is rooted in the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. And there's nothing higher than that, and beyond that, that's an immutable connection. It's actually very interesting. It just happens to be that's Avram Avinu. What does Avram Avinu tell Sarah to say when they get to Mitzrayim?
You're my sister.
You're my sister. Very bizarre. Happens 3 times, right? Avram and Yitzchak. Very bizarre. You mean you're my sister? Okay, Beseder, Rashi explains how he's not lying because she is, okay? Oh, Beseder. But I mean, what's that all about? The Rebbe says an amazing thing. Absolutely amazing. And it's relevant to what we're talking about now. There's a level of, there's many different relationships that you and I have, but the 2 very, very powerful relations are ach va'achot, or ach va'ach, right? The sibling relationship, brother-sister, right? Relative man and woman, brother-sister. And ish v'isha, husband-wife. Now, of course, Avram and Sarah, husband and wife. What does he say to her as they go into Mitzrayim? Tell them you're my sister. Meaning what? What's the difference between those 2 relationships? So obviously the most powerful relationship and the most passionate of those 2 relationships is ish v'isha. That's a very, very, very powerful relationship. Okay? And has a great advantage over ach v'achot, brother and sister. I mean, there's almost no comparison. Okay. But there is an advantage of brother, sister over ish v'isha. What is that advantage?
What relative?
Okay, what does that mean? It's an unbreakable relationship. Can't not be my brother.
Families.
Can't not be my sister.
Consistency.
Unbreakable. Ish v'isha, it's breakable. It's a sin called a get. You can break that relationship. As powerful as it is, and it is very powerful, and it's indicative of our most powerful relationship with the Eibishter on a certain level. But what does Avram say to Sarah? There are times in life when it might be that you're entering into a state of darkness, Mitzrayim, and you're not going to be very powerfully aware of the passion of your revealed relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what might you have to fall back on? Your essential, unbreakable relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's a chaysiat. You're my sister. You're not my wife.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Right? You're my sister. It's unbreakable. We have an unbreakable bond.
Wow.
Oh, well, that's coming from Etzem and Neshama, that unbreakable bond. That's an essential connection. Now, the problem with an essential connection is not necessarily revealed in revealed reality, right? So I might not feel it. Okay, but it's there. So when you and I talk about a yid, we spend a great deal of time focusing on this essential connection, and it's so important. It's something Chassidus talks about, and it's something that someone who doesn't learn Chassidus might not be so aware of. So they might say things about Jews who, for whatever reason, don't keep Torah and mitzvahs. They might say all sorts of horrible things about them. Why? Well, because in their revealed reality, they might be doing very horrible things. Right? Meaning, generally in Chutz La'aretz, the unaffiliated Jew is relatively harmless in terms of their effect on the Jewish community as a whole. Okay, but say they might go to a pro-Palestinian march, but I mean, who cares? I mean, so that's just... but they're relatively harmless. Here in Eretz Yisrael, and it can be very distressing, there are Jews who are extremely harmful. They're dangerous, and they're bordering on evil. They're really not good people, right? And it's never going to come out because they're the people who are in charge, but what happened in Simchas Torah might very well have had to do with a certain desire of certain people in the higher up to make the prime minister look bad and not respond as quickly as they could have responded, not knowing what was really happening, obviously. They took a gamble and lost big time. That's the basic understanding as to what happened, even though, that side never pays, ever, for what they do, ever. They're like Teflon. The other side always pays. That side never pays. I don't know what it is. It's in every country. I don't know what it is, but they call it kavod to them. They're pretty good at that. They never actually have to pay the price in a court of law, right? But there might have been some pretty heavy stuff. Okay. And even while the war was going on, there was some pretty heavy stuff. And their absolute hate of the person who happens to be the elected prime minister is so severe that it blinds them to everything else. And that makes it very hard to, you have to really work very, very hard to realize that Jew is as essentially connected to the Eibishter as anybody else. He's the modern day capo. He's the modern day Izvesky, right? The Jews who were interrogating Jews in the Soviet Union. There are people like that. Okay. And it's pretty heavy. So it's mamish heavy. Okay. And not okay, but I mean, and is that Jew connected to the Eibishter essentially? Yes. Exactly the same as every other Jew. So we talk about that a lot. Right? Okay. And here the Rebbe's telling us, and that's why we're so sensitive to the power of the essential connection of a Yid to the Eibishter. And yet here, what's the Rebbe telling us? Let's worry more about the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu and a little less about the temperature. Right? What's the Rebbe telling us here? You're more powerfully connected to the Eibishter when you're putting on tefillin or learning a Maimer Chassidus or learning a page of Gemara or trying to figure out a Mishnah or giving some stucca. You're more powerfully connected to the Eibishter than the essence of your soul is connected to the essence of the Eibishter. That's what the Rebbe just said. That's the aliyah. That's the elevation. Why? Because what's the neshama all about? Up there in Atzmus, when the Eibishter, so to speak, envisions the neshama, when he has the neshama that's chakuk b'machshavtai, that's rooted in his, that's engraved in his consciousness. What's that neshama doing? Wearing tefillin, giving tzedakah, lighting Shabbos candles, educating a child. All those things that Jews do that give the Eibishter unbelievable pleasure. And the only reason anything outside of Atzmus exists is because the Eibishter wants that pleasure that he gets from you putting on tefillin. Is he selfish? Okay, you can go there if you want. But don't ever enjoy one iota of anything that you get from the Eibishter, or else you're a hypocrite. If you call him selfish, because everything you have, he gives you. Everything. Also the stuff that you're not so happy with. I'm saying, but all the good stuff. And we have a lot of good stuff. We have it so good that we can fiddle around with little things on the wall to get the temperature just right. Louis XIV couldn't do that. His house was bigger, but Louis XIV probably smelled. He covered it up with cheap, it wasn't cheap, probably expensive fridge perfume. But he had to smell the guy who was working for him, who couldn't afford the expensive stuff and probably used the cheap stuff. So it wasn't so nice being Louis. It's unbelievable what I just said. Al pize yuvan inin aliyah shenaser, but neshamas ayidei ridasan lamata. Hagam shegam, even though before lifnei yiridasan, before they descended into this world, hein mushrashis batzmus yizbarach, they're rooted in Atzmus. But why are they up there, so to speak? Why is the neshama up there in Atzmus? Because that which they're rooted in the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, behem nimlach, and in them he took counsel, should I or should I not create the world? Hu mitzad yediyasa yizbarach, that's a function of his knowledge. And again, the Rebbe has been saying kaviyachal a lot. Mitzad yediyasa yizbarach shetiyeh achar kach yiridasan lamata, that the Eibishter knows that what's going to happen, that afterwards relative to us, not relative to the Eibishter, those neshamas are going to descend below into a world, into a place called Mayim Rabim v'yashlimu hakavana, and they're going to fulfill the ultimate intention. What are they going to do? They're going to put on tefillin and give tzedakah and help another Jew. Teach a little child Torah. Have children. If they're males, they have a mitzvah to have children. Right? So they'll fulfill that mitzvah Be'ez Hashem, and then they'll teach their children Torah, which is another mitzvah they have, which is the Iker mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Look up Hilchos Talmud Torah in the Rambam, where it was the whole mitzvah is teach your children. You also have to learn, and then you have to teach other people, but the Iker mitzvah of Talmud Torah is teaching your children. Okay. So why is there a neshama in Atzmus? We just said it. Absolutely amazing thing. Why is there a neshama in Atzmus? There's a neshama in Atzmus because up there in Atzmus, the Eibishter has this vision of the neshama. So it's up there. That vision is happening in Atzmus, so to speak. He has this vision of the neshama down here doing mitzvahs. Chakuk b'machshavtei. Yisrael alu b'machshavtei. And therefore, you and I are more powerfully connected to the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu by virtue of putting on tefillin than we are by virtue of the existential reality of being in the neshama that's rooted in Atzmus. The neshama is rooted in Atzmus. That's true. And the neshama up there has an immutable connection with the Eibishter. That's true. Unbreakable. Okay. True. But you want to come close to the Eibishter? Take $1 and put it in a pushka. Well, take $5, give it to some guy who can't afford lunch. take him out to lunch. Got a message from a former Mayanoter, and just in passing, he was telling me something, and he explained a conversation he had with a homeless guy in New York that he took out for lunch. He didn't write me to tell me he took a homeless guy out for lunch. That was not part of the conversation. It just happened to be that in order to tell me something, that piece of information came up in the context of what he was telling me. I was impressed. Obviously he was a Jewish homeless person. There are 8 billion people who can take care of the other homeless people, and there's a few million of us who can take care of Chas v'Sholom if there's a Jewish homeless person. Right? He took him out there. I forget the conversation. I have to look it up. It was a very interesting conversation he had with him. That's why. But it's also important to know that he was homeless in order to appreciate the conversation. Okay. So he took him out to lunch. Didn't just give him $5. He actually took him into a place and ordered food and gave him lunch. Wow. I guess Essen Bench. I don't know where he took it. I think it's closed now, but it used to be there. In the old days, it was Essen Bench, but it used to be called Fressen Belch because it wasn't the most. And then it closed for years and years and years, and then they opened up another one. 10 years ago, they opened up a new Essen Bench, which was actually reasonable. Evidently, it's also closed. But in the old days, when there were very few stores on Kingston or whatever, so there was Essen Bench.
There's a few stories of Essen Bench doing Verbringens.
Well, when you got out of the Verbring, the only thing open, Essen Bench sometimes might be, but usually the only thing that was open was at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning was Lipsker's Makolit. It also isn't there anymore. But Lipsker's Makolit was open, and you'd go get some yogurt with mold. Right? Huh? Yeah, on Kingston, right across from 770, there was a Makolit. And you'd have, everybody who was in the Verbringen would squish into the Makolit and try to buy their yogurt, and half the yogurt had mold and whatever, but you were pretty hungry at 3 in the morning, so she'd eat the part that didn't have the mold. But times have changed. Crown Heights was completely not middle class 40 years ago. Now it's a middle class neighborhood. It was completely not middle class. Just not at all. Bad or worse, was different. Not middle class at all. Let's see if we can finish the paragraph, and then we'll just finish the mimer tomorrow. We'll wrap it all up, and then we'll start a new mimer. Vagam shegam betchilo yoidim, and even though originally it's interesting, the Rebbe uses plural here. Yoidim, they know. Who's they? We're talking about the Eibishter, but okay, somehow meaning the upper realms. Yoidim bevados gemura, with absolute certainty. Sheyashlimu akavana, also could be the neshamas. No, up there in Atzmus, the neshamas know they're going to come down here and put on tefillin. Harizel b'kayach. That's all in a state of potential. Meaning, now the Rebbe is answering a question. Well, hold on a second. The neshama up there in Atzmus, so that's the same neshama that's putting on tefillin down here. So why is that not just as powerfully connected to the Eibishter as the neshama down here? It's all the same neshama. Oh, so the Rebbe says, because up there, the fact that the neshama up there is essentially connected to the Eibishter, and we all know that neshama is going to come down into Elam Hazah, that the Eibishter is going to create, and that neshama is going to put on tefillin. That's all b'kayach. That's all potential. But tachli sa'ilui, b'kavana, and the ultimate elevation and the ultimate intention were pale, that it should actually happen. Not that it should be in a state of potential, which is really a fascinating thing, because of course one of the things that's talked about in it's talked about in Chassidus, but it's talked about a lot more in what's called Machshevet Yisrael, Jewish philosophy. That's a terrible translation, because philosophy by definition means thoughts that people think. And Jewish philosophy is not thoughts that people think, it's trying to understand godliness just in what would be called, using philosophical language, but it's not philosophy. Like the Rambam's not philosophy. The Rambam's not telling you what the Rambam thinks. The Rambam's telling you what he thinks the Torah says. But okay, that being said, so it's called. We don't call it philosophy. We call it Machshavas Yisrael, Jewish thought. So in Machshavas Yisrael, there'll be a lot of talk about the fact one of the unique characteristics of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, And this is because he's beyond time. There's no difference between potential and actual. There is no potential. Because there's only one thing separating potential and actual. What is it? What's in between potential and actual? Time. At a certain point in time, this is potential, and at another point in time, it becomes actual. Right? Well, if you live beyond time, then those two states of reality don't exist as two separate states of reality. Okay. That being said, one of the things the Eibishter created, therefore, when he created the world and created time, the creation of space is sort of obvious to us, right? But one of the things, time is also a created reality, which is very interesting. Okay, so the Eibishter created time. That means he created the difference between koyach and toil, potential and actual. And in that context, the actual is higher than potential. So that's exactly the point of our. Once there's such a reality, so that our mitzvah is down here on a higher level than the connection of the neshama up there, where there our connection is that's going to be expressed by virtue of the mitzvah is only in a state of potential, whereas down here it's being actualized by virtue of putting on tefillin, which we're all going to do in a few minutes. Pretty amazing. So when you put on tefillin, realize you're connecting to the Eibishter more powerfully than the essence of your soul connected to the essence of God. That's what the Rebbe just taught us. And that's why what was our question? Our question was, how can we experience an elevation by virtue of coming into the Mayim Rabim? Well, that's the whole point of it all. Up there in Atzmos, what image does the Eibishter, you can't say does the Eibishter have? What's his image? You with talis and tefillin on. Not you as a neshama that's Ushuash and Atzmos. V'zeu gam diuk aloshin v'min nimlak v'nishim sem shel tzadikim, and this is also a careful reading of the words of the Medrash. We'll try to finish this up quickly if we're not done in a minute, so then we'll stop and we'll finish it tomorrow. V'zeu gam diuk aloshin v'min nimlak v'nishim sem shel tzadikim, and the neshamas of tzadikim should be yesim bebechinas amlocha, when they're still in the bechinas quality, when they're still in the quality, meaning in the state of hamlocha, of the advice. I mean, that's still happening up there, so to speak. Sha'aza ilui shalem. Therefore, the loftiness is then hu b'koyach. It's all in a state of potential. Sheyedim sheyashlimu kavana, that they know that the neshama are going to come down into Elam Hazeh and fulfill the intention, which is do the mitzvah. But up there, what did we say? Up there, what quality is the neshama? Tzadikim. And bebechinas tzadikim. Oh, that's what we said. Now we're going back to what the Rebbe explained in the fourth chapter. In the fourth chapter, the Rebbe just explained the equation. Balei Tshuva on a higher level than tzaddikim. Oh, what's tzaddikim? The neshama is up there. What are Balei Tshuva? The neshama is down here. La'achri yidos and lamata, and after, and that's why the Medrash says, when was so to speak, from whom did a Kadosh Baruch Hu take advice? Nishmasem shel tzaddikim, when the neshamas were still up there. They hadn't come down here and actualize the potential that exists up there. Then they come down here and they actualize that potential, and so on. They are now in the level of Baal Tshuva as opposed to the level of the Tzaddik, which is a higher level. Now we understand why it's a higher level, because it's connecting to the actualization of that image that the Eibishter has of the neshama up there, of the neshama doing a mitzvah down here. That's when the Eibishter conjures up the image of that Jewish soul. What does he see? He sees the soul he doesn't just see the essential existence of the soul as something connected to him. He sees the true power of that soul, that it can be down there in Mayim Rabim, it can be down there in a place of absolute craziness and still put on tefillin and still give tzedakah and still keep Shabbos and still eat kosher food, that it can connect to the Eibishter down there in the Mayim Rabim. That's the true power of the neshama. That's the true essential expression of the neshama. Up there, they're still tzaddikim. And after they descend below, then they fulfill this intention in actuality, which is what the Eibishter wants. Then they become Balei Tshuva. And that's what the Rebbe said in Ois Dalet. So the Rebbe just explained everything he said in Ois Dalet. He just explained in the last 3 lines. Why? How does what we explained on this page, how does it relate back to this page? This page. Everything we explained in Dalit is connect. After explaining everything the Rebbe explains in Hey, how the neshama can experience an aliyah by virtue of coming into this world, the Rebbe connects that to Ois Dalit by virtue of using the terms tzaddikim and balei tshuva, which we used in Ois Dalit to explain the elevation. Okay, we'll go through all of this again tomorrow to make sure that it's something, and it might be a good idea if you ever want to remember this, which might be worth it, is to write it down. Force yourself to write this down. And then you'll remember. If you don't write it down, you might remember it tomorrow morning when we go over it. We'll see. Amnon will. We'll see tomorrow how much everybody remembers what we learned today. But you're definitely not going to have any memory of this whatsoever in a month. Unless you work at it. And such an idea. Should live with this every day. If I live with this every day, my goodness gracious, my life would be very different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What time is it?
Well, I can ask you a quick question?
You just did. You want to ask another?